Hello and welcome to my presentation on instruction for beginning homebrewers. Who are homebrewers? Well, they're people who brew their own beer at home. According to the American Homebrewers Association, anyone who can make soup from a can is capable of brewing quality beer in their home. There are a few exceptions to this. People who live in Alabama, Mississippi, and Oklahoma can't homebrew, and people under 21 can't homebrew. Who are homebrewers really? Although in theory the hobby is open to just about anyone, generally the people who are interested in homebrewing are those who want to have more control over the flavor of their beer. They're disappointed with commercial products. And there are some de facto restrictions on who is a homebrewer, partially because of initial capital requirements. There's some money that has to be put into buying ingredients, buying materials, and possibly spending money on homebrewing instruction. And there are time requirements as well. A homebrewer needs to have about 2 full days over a 2-week period for each batch of beer that they brew. And historically, homebrewing has been a male-dominated hobby, and it still is today. The American Homebrewer Association performed a study in 1997 and found that 97% of homebrewers were male, 75% were college educated, and 53% had an annual income over $56,000. And the training developed for this workshop and this presentation hopefully appeals to just about any demographic, but of course it is important to keep in mind the likely demographics that would be interested in a presentation like this. For this project, I did perform a literature review and came to understand the information needs of beginning homebrewers. There has been a real growth in the hobby in the last several years, and so there's been a proliferation of information as well. And so beginning homebrewers need to develop some information-seeking skills. Their needs involve locating and selecting equipment and locating and selecting instruction. And those both involve elements of comparison and of pricing. They need to understand the ingredients that will go into their beer, and they need to be able to locate and select recipes that use the right ingredients to create the desired beer flavor. They need to locate ingredients and supplies which are available for mail order or online or at local homebrew shops, and often just at hardware stores. And they also need to have information on the actual process of brewing. And so the workshop that I designed addresses specifically 3 of these needs. It addresses the ability to identify ingredients, identify recipes that contain those ingredients or that can be modified with those ingredients to create the desired flavor, and the ability to locate recipes from trusted authorities online and in print. And so just to briefly sum up this rubric that assesses skills and competencies, a very beginning homebrewer would be able to identify maybe some of the basic beer ingredients. They can tell which recipe will make the type of beer they like. For example, which recipe would make an India Pale Ale. And they can find a recipe in a cookbook or use Google to find a homebrew recipe online, but they're not really familiar with any authorities in the field of homebrewing. An intermediate homebrewer could identify most ingredients and understand them. They can identify recipe styles of all kinds of beers and can start to do a little bit of experimentation. And they're familiar with some of the big names in the field, the American Homebrewers Association and that sort of thing. And in the advanced category, these homebrewers would be able to identify ingredients and different varieties, even kind of rare and unusual ones. And they can do very well predicting their effect, which allows them to do a lot of experimentation. And they're very familiar with the world of homebrewing, with the authorities, and they can very quickly and easily find quality new materials to fit their homebrewing needs. The workshop that I designed was based on Keller's ARCS model to reach all learners, and it takes place in a computer lab, so there's workstations for each participant, and the instructor also has a computer its screen is projected for participants to see. And it begins with two activities designed to arouse attention and make the workshop relevant to participants. First, as participants enter the room, there would be a display of different beer ingredients, malts and hops and sugars and all those kinds of things, but they would be unlabeled. And so this would arouse perceptual attention and uncertainty because they wouldn't be familiar with all of the ingredients, and the participants would be encouraged to explore them. And then as everyone entered and settled down, the first activity would be the instructor asking for volunteers to relate a memory they have of having a really great beer and what they liked about that beer, what made the experience good, and that sort of thing. And then the workshop itself would basically be divided into two sections. There would first be the discussion of the ingredients. So there'd be a brief lecture, an activity where participants would be asked to stand up if you like porters or stand up if you like wheat beers. And then to find others in the room who seem to have the same tastes and go and explore the ingredients whose labels would now be visible. And then the second part would focus on locating recipes, where participants would again follow a brief lecture accompanied with a visual presentation from the instructor, and then they would replicate those computer searches for recipes, visit some of the sites the instructor recommended. And as individuals or in groups, they would also be encouraged to walk around and view other participants' results. And then they would come back together. And as a class, we would share our experiences and our results. And these activities and lectures are designed to appeal to all sorts of learners, specifically the 4 types of learners McCarthy identified. So the why learners would be interested in the listing and relating aspects of the workshop. How learners would be interested in the parts where they learned by doing and teaching others. What learners would appreciate classifying and comparing. And the what if learners would like the experimental and discovery portions of the workshop. And then back to the ARCs. For confidence and satisfaction, the reporting and sharing session at the end would sort of reiterate the objectives of the lesson and remind participants of what they've learned and what they can take into their brewing experience. And the final portion of the workshop is the opportunity for evaluation, where there would be both an oral opportunity and a handout for participants to talk about their satisfaction with the program and what they'd like to see in the future. So this is the workshop and instruction that I've designed for beginning homebrewers. I appreciate you watching, and I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. Please do visit homebrewinginstruction.wordpress.com for further information. Thank you.